Hello and welcome to the 29th episode of the Commander Quest podcast, where today we are going to be talking about Core 21 2021 spoilers and which cards are notable. Now, we're not going to be covering too much stuff before we get into it, but real quick, first of all, I am instituting a new feature in the podcast. I am basically in the description, there's going to be a link to a place where you can submit voice messages. Think of it as something similar to emailing me a question that you can ask me. And then I can include that in my podcast if I want and answer it. If I end up getting enough questions, I will start a listener question section of the podcast. If not, I will not have that question. I will not have that segment. So far, I have not received any listener questions. But if you have questions, feel free to ask me there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's going to be voice messages. You can email me. You can send me something through Discord, PM me. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. But currently I don't have that segment because I don't have any questions to answer. Alright, next up is the Core 2021 information. First of all, I want to say sorry that this episode was late. The article that I was reading for dates said that Core 2021 would be done being spoiled on the 19th, which was wrong. I believe it was done being spoiled on the 17th or 18th, actually. On the 16th or 17th. I am not sure, but point is, it's going to be a later set release. And then, now that it is completely spoiled, it will be released on Arena and Magic Online the 25th. The pre-release is going to be the 26th to 28th, and the release will be the 3rd to the 4th. Not sure why that's in July. I'm not sure why that is 2 days. The pre-release, of course, makes sense. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but whatever. So, those are the release dates. Of course, the reason that it is released on Arena and Magic Online is because of COVID-19. I really hope they don't use this as an excuse to make it so that it actually does, in the future, get released on those platforms first, because that could be super detrimental and annoying. I really hope they don't do that, and I don't think they will. Because it's a lot easier to make a profit. Well, you know what? I don't know whether it's a lot easier to make a profit on Arena or on PAX, but who knows? Probably the marketing people know. So, it is time to get into the set review. So, of this, there's just the set, and then there are the Planeswalker decks. Now, the Planeswalker decks, I'm honestly a little bit confused, because they only spoiled 4 cards for each deck, and even if they printed 4 of each of those cards, that would be 16 cards, plus a lot of them I doubt they would print 4 of. It just doesn't really make sense. Maybe they're gonna spoil more, but the fact that they classified it under the same set and said that it was fully spoiled makes me question that. And even if they did do 40 card decks, that would still not be a normal amount. But I guess we will see how that goes. Alright, so the next thing I have to say is, I'm just gonna go over the cards. We'll start off with the Planeswalker decks. So, for the Planeswalker decks, and for the rest of the set, I am not covering every card. I am only covering ones that I think are notable. As of reprints, I am sort of covering them. I will be covering reprints, but only if they are very important, and I won't be talking too much about them because, honestly, it's redundant. Yay, this card is cheaper. Great. There's not really much more to it. Alright, Planeswalker decks. So, for the Planeswalker decks, we have Teferi, Timeless Voyager, we have Teferi, Liliana, Garruk, Chandra, and Basri as the Planeswalkers in them. I also have one more card that was notable in them. So, first, Teferi, Timeless Voyager. 4 blue for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. +1, draw a card. -3, put target creature on top of its owner's library. And -8, each creature target opponent controls phases out. Until the end of your next turn, they can't phase in. So, of course, same as usual, it is bad. I mean, the +1 is pretty standard on a Planeswalker, but pretty mediocre, not really great. The -3 might be okay, but when you consider it goes down to 1 loyalty, it's not going to protect him. It's not going to protect the Planeswalker. It's bad. It's not really playable. Next is Liliana, Deathmage. 4 black for 4 loyalty, +1. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. -3, destroy target creature, its controller loses 2 life. -7, target opponent loses 2 life for each creature card in their graveyard. Boom. There we go. Another pretty bad Planeswalker. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, might be a little bit better, but that -3 isn't really going to protect it because it'll be at 1 loyalty. It doesn't really matter if you get rid of 1 creature if they only have to deal 1 damage to it. Garruk, Savage Herald. Oh, did I read the ultimate? Yeah, I did. The ultimate is also pretty bad. Garruk, Savage Herald is 4 green for a 5 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Garruk. +1, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your library. Again, this is just worse than drawing a card. We're just getting 6 mana Planeswalkers with draw a card. Stop doing the same exact abilities, the same exact payoffs. It is so overdone. Especially in green. Green, black, blue. Guess what all their abilities were? +1, draw a card, or worse, or similar. It's just annoying. -2, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. So, I don't know what they were thinking, but literally these first 3 creatures all have basically the same Planeswalkers. All have basically the same abilities. 6 mana, 4, or I guess in this case, 5 loyalty. +1, draw a card or something similar. -2, get rid of a creature or something similar. That's like, what? And then -7 is pretty bad in all these cases. I mean, Teferi, they lose their creatures for 2 turns. Okay, so Liliana Deathmage, they lose 2 life for each creature in their graveyard. I mean, that can be impactful, but is it really gonna win you the game? Who knows? You aren't even necessarily milling them. And then Garruk, -7, until end of turn, creatures you control gain. You may have this creature assign its combat damage so it weren't blocked. I mean, that's even worse than Teferi's ultimate. I mean, they just, I don't know. They're just kind of bad. Okay, next up is Basri, Devoted Paladin, 4 white for 4 loyalty, legendary Planeswalker Basri. You may remember I had this last week in one of my decks. I believe it was the Vigilance Exert deck. Yes, that's it. Because of its +1 ability, +1, put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature. It gains Vigilance until end of turn. -1 whenever a creature attacks this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And -6, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain flying until end of turn. So, at first look, you're like, okay, yes, finally something different. But no! Literally, white and red are the only cards that don't have some of the most important mechanics in Magic. Drawing cards and getting rid of creatures. Actually, no, white can. White and red can sort of get rid of creatures. Red, not really. It's more complicated than that, but these are some important abilities that are overdone in green, black, and blue, and they're just keep on repeating it and making it super redundant and boring. And in white and red, they repeat the ideas that they always have in boring and less powerful ways. Like, this is just worse than so many other Planeswalkers for so many reasons. I don't know. It's just kind of sad. Alright, next Planeswalker is Chandra, Flames Catalyst. 4 and red for 5 loyalty. Legendary Planeswalker Chandra. +1. Chandra deals 1 damage to each opponent. 3 damage to each opponent. -2. You may cast target red instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If that spell would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. I mean, the recursion's nice, but why does every other color get draw a card as a benefit, as a +1, and red gets it as a -2? Like, sure, it's not exactly +1, draw a card, it's get a card back from your hand, but I counted that in black, and I'm counting it in red. And instant and sorcery is also pretty niche, and it has to be red. And you only get it for 1 turn, and it gets exiled. Like, it's just kind of worse in so many ways. I mean, the +1 can be useful, but it's not that great. Okay, -8, discard your hand, then draw 7 cards. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. I will say this is probably one of the best ultimates, but considering it takes 4 turns to do it with basically no protection, unless we count that -2 being able to get back a removal spell as protection, which is ridiculous, and then makes it take 3 more turns in order to actually get there, so the protection is useless. So, even if it does have a better ultimate, we're never going to get there. I mean, it's like, with this type of card, the only way, with most Planeswalkers, the main way you're going to ultimate them is either by opponents figuring out, literally forgetting that you have the card, or by just you using some kind of doubler, like maybe a doubling season or a bubbling season, something like that. Bubbling season, if you do not know, what's it called? I don't know, it's a fish that when it enters the battlefield, you double the counters on any number of target permanents, or maybe it's 1 permanent. Not sure, but it's similar to doubling season. Okay, well, the last notable thing for Planeswalker decks is Carol Keep Disciples. 2 red for creature, human, monk. Whenever you activate a loyalty ability of a Chandra Planeswalker, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So, this may seem bad, and you'd be partially right. There are 17 Chandra Planeswalkers in the game, and Chandra Tribal is a thing. So, in a red Planeswalker deck, this can be useful as it can do 2 to 3 damage to each opponent each turn. So, Yes, it is good. Is it groundbreaking? No. Is it super niche? Yes. But it is a thing. And honestly, it's kind of the most useful thing out of all these cards. As always, I'm disappointed with the Planeswalker decks. They always make it so that new players need to have weak cards. Why? Why do new players have to have cards that don't have any value and not any power? Because they're too stupid to know what to buy? Is that your angle? Is that their angle? Because I don't like the idea that new players cannot learn anything. They have to start with the most basic things. It's a horrible mindset that we've been telling WotC that that's a bad mindset for so long. And they need to work on it. They really need to work on the Planeswalker decks. And I mean, maybe, I don't know who's buying this. If you are trying to get into Magic alone, maybe I could see you buying this, but, well, let's think about this. If you're trying to get into Magic alone, there's a lot of different places you can go. One is the internet. Nowhere on the internet is someone going to tell you to buy that. Two is talking to someone at an LGS. I highly doubt they're going to recommend that you get that. Unless they don't play the game, then I could understand that. Like, all these places, if you're talking to an actual human, you're not really going to think about getting that. Or, sorry, not an actual human. Someone who actually plays the game. So, I guess it's just people who are learning, but who want to learn how to play this game by themselves, which makes no sense. And are just looking for Magic products or gifts. That's my theory of why these are selling. They're always on the shelves. Like, it just makes sense as gifts. So, quite strange. I don't know where these are selling, but obviously they are. Otherwise, WotC would have made changes. So, who knows? I mean, I guess it's good to have the thing that can help people get into the game always in stock, but is that really? I mean, they have the decks that they give out for free. Like, isn't that what this is supposed to be? I mean, maybe it's just people, I don't know. I'm going to stop speculating, but I don't know who is buying these and why. Like, it just seems strange. I get that that's WotC's path. They say, okay, first get one of the free decks, then get one of the Planeswalker decks. Then maybe try a draft, try opening some packs. And then do what you want. You know, maybe buy a Challenger deck, although those are inconsistent. Who knows? Whatever you like after that is up to you. But, I don't know. It just seems strange. So, beyond that, gonna go over one other category sticks out to me, and that would be reprints. By sticks out, I mean it would be good to go over in the beginning. So, as I said, reprints, not gonna go over them too much. I will just touch on them, read them over. It's the same story for all of these. This is a wonderful reprint. Glad that the price is lower. Used to be X dollars, is now X dollars. Not going to repeat that, except for one card. Well, two, actually. Heroic Intervention, 1 in a green for an instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Azusa, Lost but Seeking, 2 in a green, 1/2. You may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. Grim Tutor, 1 black for a sorcery. Search your library for a card. Put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. You lose 3 life. Alright, this is one of the 2 cards that I said that I'd actually talk about. This used to be $300, and it will now probably be, I'm gonna guess probably $40. So, still incredibly expensive, but at least it's manageable. Also, the alt art looks like an asshole. And now you will always see that for the rest of your life. You're welcome. Alright, Massacre Wurm. 3 black for a 6/5. When it enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. It's a 6/5. Ugin, the Spirit Dragon. 8 for a 7. Loyalty legendary planeswalker Ugin. +2. It deals 3 damage to any target. -X. Exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less that's 1 or more colors. -10. You gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. This used to be about $100. Probably now will be about $40. Usually when cards that have astronomically high costs are reprinted, they end up about $40. Depends, but that's a pattern that I've noticed. Of course, it depends. Not saying I really know, just saying that's a fairly likely conclusion. Alright, next, let's talk about the commanders. So, there are some... Now, here's the first thing I noticed about the commanders. While there is some pattern, it is not perfectly balanced between all colors what commanders are being printed in what colors. There's not really cycles or one in each color pair or anything like that, which I honestly think is wonderful. Some people, while it can be nice to have balance in between the colors, it can be extremely limiting to making nice designs if you have to stick to that. So, just overall, make it balanced, and it will be fine. Now, I'm just going to quickly, I don't know how quickly, I'm going to go over the commanders. First, we have Jolrael, Moanvuli Recluse. 1 and a green for a 1/2. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 green cat creature token. And 4 green. Until end of turn, creatures you control have base, power, and toughness X, where X is the number of cards in your hand. So, there's a lot of different ways to do this. First, of course, we want to have engines that will draw us a card on every one of our turns so that we will consistently get that 2/2. Second thing we can do is we can use things that draw us a card for each creature on the battlefield or each creature we control. That way we have a large amount of creature cards in our hand and we are producing a cat creature token. Third thing we can do is try to draw 2 cards on our opponent's upkeeps. Now we are in green, so that can be difficult to do. But there are a lot of different ways. First is we could use a Yeva, Nature's Herald, which can let us flash out green creatures. Then we can use those to draw some more cards. Second thing is by using artifacts, and usually they're activated abilities. And third thing, instants and sorceries aren't really going to work very well. There are really not that many green instants, and I don't think there are any green instants at instant speed that will draw us 2 cards. I could check that, but that would interrupt my podcast. So, next up is Nyambi, Esteemed Speaker. That is white-blue for 2/1 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, you gain life equal to that creature's converted mana cost. And 1 white-blue. Discard a legendary card, draw 2 cards. So, there's a lot of notable things. First of all, we get to return a creature. So this can be helpful to recast creatures, but we only get to do it once. And it says another creature, so we can't recast it over and over again. So it can be useful in a bounce deck, and it can helm that bounce deck, but that doesn't work great. We can try to take advantage of bouncing our opponent's creatures, which also doesn't really work great. Yes, we get to bounce one thing, and that's kind of all. The best way, in my opinion, to take advantage of this is flicker. If we flicker this creature, we can bounce things to their hands over and over again. Plus, as we flicker it, if we want, we can bounce our own thing that will bring an instant or sorcery back to our hand that we can use to flicker it again. Now, that can be rather difficult to do, and difficult to take advantage of, but it certainly can work. Also, as Flash, it can just be nice protection at the helm of a Selesnya control deck. Azorius control deck. And the last part of it, 1 white, blue, tap, discard a legendary card, draw 2 cards. Now, that might seem relatively useless in the beginning in that flicker deck, but this can helm a legendary creature or a legendary card, a legendary deck, and that doesn't work too well. There's just not very much to build around, and having it in your graveyard isn't necessarily helpful in white, blue. The thing I would recommend is just carefully choosing in your deck to have extra legendary cards, especially in the lands. There are plenty of cards in lands that are just legendary, and it can be a great way to take some extra advantage out of it. So, that's my take on Nyambi. It could be a very effective flicker deck with a sub-theme of legendary. Next up is Subira, Tolzidi Caravaner, which is 200 red for 2/3 with haste. 1. Another target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. 1 red tap. Discard your hand. Until end of turn, whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So, let's get into this. First of all, the theme of another target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn is actually very consistent. That has been printed multiple times on usually goblins that can tap to make it so that target creature with power 2 or less cannot be blocked. Now, that's not particularly relevant because you might or may not want to include those cards in your deck, but it can be a great way to. Now, my take on it is sort of like another Edric. While it is significantly worse than Edric in significantly worse colors, hear me out. So, in red, it is difficult to get some cheap it's not difficult to get cheap CMC creatures. It is difficult to get creatures with evasion. So, this provides it. You can make a ton of creatures in red. It is so easy to make a lot of creatures, a lot of little tokens. And this will give you the evasion you need. And it will give you advantage. You can be playing with goblins that love to take advantage of discarding your hand. That can be a sub-theme. You can waste away your hand and just easily get it back. With all these tokens and all this production you are creating, a lot of creatures that will draw you a lot of cards that you can easily give evasion. You might even want to give it a goblin sub-theme, as that will A, be basically the only way to create tokens effectively in those colors, and B, it will make it so that you have basically just more options. So, in conclusion, it's a way in this deck, you're just going to throw in a ton of token production, some evasion, things like that, and it's just going to work. You can use your mana to make it go through and refill your hand in red. You can absolutely lay waste to your hand, and you'll get it back. That is an extremely important thing in Red, and it's great to have a commander that embraces that. You have to embrace the chaos of no cards in hand in Red and wasting it all away. People are always trying to fight against it. This deck can help you love it. And it's high risk. If your board gets wiped away, you're done for. But I think it would be really fun to take that risk. Alright, next up is Baron, Tolarian Archmage. 1 blue for a 2/2 legendary creature human wizard. When Baron, Tolarian Archmage, enters the battlefield, return up to one other target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. And at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw a card. So, at first glance, you see a bounce deck. You just want to bounce and replay your cards. And honestly, that's what you want. Now, of course, you can take advantage of this with Flicker, but you don't necessarily need to. I think it is much better to just embrace the bounce. There are plenty of cards that will let you cast them over and over again. I would want this to be in more colors, because if you add white, there are a lot of cards in white that have flash and will let you bounce it back to your hand, but sadly that's not there. Now, I do think it is a little bit boring to have the payoff be draw a card, but as I have said, we are going to be recasting creatures over and over and over again. So what we can do is we can take advantage of creatures with enter the battlefield abilities, or we can take advantage of just drawing that card. There are a lot of different things that will trigger off of that in blue. So overall, it is a fairly basic bounce deck, similar to a Flicker deck, but it is a new archetype. And while it can be difficult to be using a bounce deck because those valuable ETBs usually come on large CMC creatures, it can also be a great new way to take advantage of these things. Plus, you can reuse cast triggers, which can be a major factor. So, I think this opened up a new archetype, which is wonderful. Next is Gadrak, the Crown Scourge. 2 and a red for a 5/4 with flying. Gadrak can't attack unless you have 4 or more artifacts. And at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. I've been talking for 24 minutes and I've just started, so this might be a long episode. But I've found in the past, whenever I think it's going to be a long episode, I'm wrong, and whenever I think it's going to be a short episode, I'm also wrong. So I think I'm just really bad at predicting, but whatever. 4 bonus episodes, I just talk for however long I want. So, because of this is, I think, a new archetype in Red. We want to farm non-token creature death, and that's an interesting concept. So, because what you would immediately go to is create a ton of tokens and then sack them. But you can't do that. So what you can do is, first of all, it's surprisingly easy to sacrifice creatures in Red. There are actually a lot of sacrifice outlets if you know where to look. Also in colorless, there are a significant number of sacrifice outlets. So actually getting your creatures to die isn't too difficult. The second thing you can do is have some goblins will bring things back, some goblins will look for more goblins on the top of your library. Red loves goblins. You can try and do dragons, but that's not really going to work at all. So again, we're trying to farm treasure tokens. So the second thing we can look at is burn. We can try and figure out how many of our opponent's creatures we can kill. So what we can do is we can try and wrath. If we wrath, we are going to get tons of non-token creature deaths. We're going to get tons of treasures, and recasting Gadrak isn't going to matter because we have plenty of treasures for it to not matter. We can then start beating in with him. So that is great. But if you think about it, having a 5/4 flying as our payoff isn't really that great. What we want to do is we want to go Voltron. And that's another thing we can use. Because it can't attack unless you control 4 or more artifacts, we can use equipment. We can attach and suit it up so it can be a Voltron commander. That way, we can kill our opponents quickly. Now, 5 does, in theory, take 5 turns to kill. But 1 more power, we go to 4. Obviously, 4 is way too slow. We need to get it to at least 7 power. But if you think about it, that's only 2. If we use one of the many things, although not particularly in this color, if we use one of the many things that will pump by the number of artifacts we control, we can easily get a lot of power. So getting it to 7 or getting it to 11 are neither particularly difficult. So again, it's a Voltron commander that can take advantage of burn, wraths, and getting rid of our opponent's creatures. It can also try to reoccur our own creatures in some cases. There are also some cards that will allow you to recast. Things from the graveyard in red, but they're kind of uncommon. So next up is Radha, Heart to Keld. 1 red-green for 3/3. As long as it's your turn, Radha, Heart of Keld, has first strike. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may play lands from the top of your library. 4 red-green. Radha gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. And it is a 3/3. So, if you think about it, Radha, Heart to Keld, can be well used. If, in theory, the highest value you could get is equivalent to a draw per turn. If you don't get that land off top and you just have already played it, that is equivalent to drawing a card. So, in theory, you could draw up to 1 card per turn. In reality, you will most likely get roughly 0.336 if we're assuming that you're running 36 lands per turn, which is okay. 1/3 of the time, roughly, a little bit more than that, maybe 4/10, you will get a card. And that seems okay. I mean, getting the lands off the top of your library is mediocre. Some of the time you can take advantage of it. Some of the time you can't. So, overall, that's mediocre and hard to take advantage of. Second part has first strike. That is semi-hard to take advantage of. Giving it Death Touch can make that much better, but that is not really great. And the third ability is maybe notable. So it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. So if we look at this in the scope of a Voltron commander, so if we're trying to get it to 7, that is 4 lands. And that's going to happen. We have to have at least 6, assuming we don't have artifacts to ramp, which would be quite silly. Of course, we're going to use land ramp. So if we have 6 lands, then it's up to 9. So we might as well go for 8. Try and get it up to 11. 18 is a pretty unreasonable number, unless we use a land doubler, which are semi-common, but it's still difficult. So if we try to get 8 lands, which I'd say is somewhat difficult to do, I mean, it's just, once we get to that point, we are pouring all of our mana into Radha. Now, the good part of that is if they blow it out, we still have a full hand. we have a full hand of cards that we can play to get back if they blow up Radha. But the downside of that is we can't protect it. We are using so much mana on it. We have, 2 mana left? And we can't really cast anything else that's complementary. It's kind of everything we have out. And even if we do have things we can cast later, it might be too little too late. So, as a Voltron commander, I'd say it's pretty bad, but it can work. It definitely can work. Green does love making a lot of lands. Plus, being able to look at the top card of your library can help you take advantage of that, but because we're in red-green, the only advantage of that we can take is being able to play lands off of it, which we can already do. Alright, next up is Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. 2 and a black for 1/3. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Creature 3 black. Creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. And it is a 1/3. So, first thing that pops into everyone's head, and I know it popped into your head, is a Blood Bond combo. This is a half of the Blood Bond combo. And if you are running this, you will include that combo. Both halves, because having a second version of your commander that stacks is quite awesome. Now, of course we're going to have that, but that's not a whole deck. Sure, we can add lots of tutors for it and stuff, and we can actually win surprisingly consistently with that combo if we want to go for that. But I'm not going to talk about that. That's a fairly easy, fairly boring, in my opinion, deck. Everyone has their own taste of decks. Do not let anyone tell you your deck is not interesting, because it's up to you. Now, but you have to be careful because they're probably not saying, oh, your deck isn't interesting to you. They're probably saying it's not interesting to them. They don't like playing against it. Just make sure you have your own opinion and you're playing what you love. So, Vito. So if we look at the second ability, beyond that, we can give our creatures lifelink. So, being able to gain a lot of life when we think about it. So the first thing I think of is our life doublers. Things that will double your life will kill, most likely, an opponent. Well, that could work. It sadly is all in white. Being able to have white and black would make this significantly better. But that is okay because we can still try and take advantage. So if we think about our creatures, what is the most effective way to gain life in black? And I think that this is actually pointing us in the right direction. The best way to gain life in black is by beaters with lifelink. And in this case, I think we can abandon the beaters with lifelink and just replace them. Don't you just love spam calls? Isn't it great when you're recording a podcast and you just get a wonderful spam call to interrupt you? Isn't that great? I don't know. I think I'm on a list or something. I've gotten 4 of them this day. I don't even know if that's a thing. People always say that, you're on a list or something. Is that an actual thing? I don't know. I'll probably Google it later. But point is, I'm very annoyed by that. So, in black, probably the most effective way, especially with this being able to give things lifelink, to gain life is with big beaters. Now, paying 5 mana each turn is a tough sell, and using mana reduction can be quite limited. There's really only I can only think of one, might be another 1 or 2, cards in black that will reduce it, and I believe it's Hearthstone, and it only does it by 1 mana. So, sure, it's better, still quite difficult. So, beyond that, there's not much we can do. We can give our creatures lifelink, but that's a very white ability. We can do a lot of different things, but it seems shaky. So our options are to either try and go for beaters with lifelink, which can work but is sort of limited, or to try and lean into that. Try and spend our mana on that. Because we have so much protection for our board in black, and we sort of do, we can try and lean into that and just hope we don't get blown out. But it's okay. I just think, I don't know. Like, we can gain life. We're basically dealing double damage and gaining life if we go through that path for only 5 mana a turn. So, it seems quite good. Next is Kaervek, the Spiteful. 2 black for a 3/2. Other creatures get -1, -1. Alright, let's jump into this. So, there's a couple different ways that this can be good. The first, which you have pretty little control over, is tokens. Literally, token decks cannot play against this. If you are playing... now, here's the thing with that. I don't think that actually matters. I do not think that is an upside unless you really hate your opponent's token deck. If they see this deck, I highly doubt that they will actually pull out their token deck. Now, I'm fairly certain technically the way it works is you're all supposed to reveal your commander at the same time, but people don't really do that in practice, so it kind of doesn't matter too much, but that's not really why that can be so useful. Because just incidental tokens, synergies, all this stuff, it can make people random tokens or random 1/1s. Think about how much just a random dork, a random 1/1 guy that taps for mana is out there. This can really trip up your opponents. So, the next thing you can take advantage of this with is your own creatures. You have an extremely efficient way to make it so that all the creatures that you want to die can die. And this may not seem that good, but trust me, it is. This is a great way to take advantage of plenty of abilities. And I'm not going to delve too deep into it because there's just too many different ways for me to cover, and it's all up to how you want to do it. So, this can be extremely effective, but you have to brew it carefully and carefully consider how you are doing this and what all the options are. Alright, next up is Mangara, the Diplomat. 3 and a white for a 2/4 with lifelink. Whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if two or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, draw a card. And whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. So, there are 2 ways we can go with this. The first, which is slightly more obvious, is Hate Bears. And honestly, white does kind of need a Hate Bear commander. The way that white is supposed to take advantage and get ahead of opponents is by Hate Bears, is by control, is by stacks. And it can't really do that in Commander because of the multiplayer aspect. So, white has difficulty in Commander, so if you can convince your playgroup to let you play with those cards, this could be an effective commander for it. Although I do think there are some much more effective commanders for it. But if you want a much more effective politically way of doing it, then you can go with Pillow Fort. Pillow Fort or Rattlesnake. Usually often they go together. Pillow Fort or Rattlesnake, Pillow Fort is basically a way to dissuade your opponents from attacking you. Cards that say, have your opponents have to pay 2 mana, or make it so you draw a card, or many other things that dissuade them from attacking you so that they'll attack someone else. Rattlesnake is similar, except if they attack you, they get a downside rather than having to pay a cost up front. Usually that might be like destroying a creature or something similar to that. That way they are dissuaded not to attack you. Okay, that can also be used with a removal spell to threaten a rattlesnake. So that can work. It just highlights the issues with white, and I don't know. I mean, it seems like with the cards that WotC is printing, that's what they are leaning towards. They just want the stacks in white to be good enough that it doesn't really matter what your opponents are doing, which, first of all, it's not. And it's going to be extremely difficult to make it that way. And second of all, it's not a good solution. No one wants that solution. That's not the solution we are looking for. But that can work. Could be a good stacks commander. Alright, next up is Rin and Seri. Inseparable. 1 red, green, white for 4/4. Whenever you cast a dog spell, create a 1/1 green cat creature token. Whenever you cast a cat spell, create a 1/1 white dog creature token. And it's a 4/4. Red, green, white, tap. Rin and Seri Inseparable deals damage to any target equal to the number of dogs you control. You gain life equal to the number of cats you control. Now, first, this is cute and awesome, and I love it. Second, it's a split tribe. One of the tribes which is relatively new. Yes, hounds have been eroded to now be dogs, but there's not very much hound or dog tribal in existence. Dog is a relatively new tribe, and cat does have some support, but it's never been that great. And the second issue is cat, which loves going tall. Having a couple super impactful cats now is not. It is now trying to go wide so we can gain life equal to the number of cats I control. That's not how that works. And getting a 1/1 cat when we cast a dog isn't that great either. It's a split deck that doesn't give us that doesn't play to the strengths of the tribes and is overall mediocre. I mean, we can gain life equal to the number of cats we control is basically doesn't matter. And dealing damage equal to the number of dogs we control to any target can be quite useful as removal, but as I just said, dogs are pretty weak. So there's 2 ways we can do this. One is just look at it and just throw in a ton of the most playable dogs and the most playable cats and throw in some cat synergy, and it just won't work that well. You just have to pick one cat, even though you're casting all these other cats randomly to have it be the one that you want to pump up. It's just awkward. It's not designed well to the strengths of the tribes. And it's not really an effective way to meld. I just don't think melding 2 tribes it works. I don't think it works. They've been constantly printing cards like this, and I think it's cute and fun, but it doesn't really work. I mean, I guess it's their idea of a way to make it so that 2 not too supported tribes become supported by just melding them, but it's kind of only one unsupported tribe. I don't know. I don't know what the solution to this is, and I'm sure people can come up with playable decks for it, but it's just awkward and doesn't play to the strengths. WotC needs to make synergies with tribes based on the abilities and the patterns that we find when we're working with those tribes, not based on the tribe, literally the tribe name. Literally, the name is the only thing that matters. We don't care if it's a shapeshifter. Shapeshifters should be much, much less useful in Magic. The fact that shapeshifters are so widely used in tribal decks well displays the mistakes that WotC is making. We should have synergies based on what historically these tribes have done on their cards, not based on the name on the type line. That, I don't know. I guess that's just not how it's going to work. I mean, they've constantly been printing this, and they haven't really received backlash. People say, this isn't that great, but there's not really too much backlash. All right, next category. This one's pretty straightforward. So I just pulled the ones to the side that were similar to old cards. Similar to cards that have already been printed, so we can well establish exactly how they're going to be used. So I'm going to say similar to new is the new cards that are similar to an old card. And similar to old is the card that it's similar to. So first is Unleash Fury. 1 in a red for an instant. Double the power of target creature until end of turn. That is similar to Temur Battle Rage. 1 in a red, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. It also has Ferocious. That creature gains trample until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. But we're not worrying about that. So, if we look at where Temur Battle Rage is played, it is semi-widely played. It is played in a significant number of decks, but it is also niche at the same time. Unleash Fury, I would say, is similar, except it's better. There are a lot more double strike effects than there are double power effects, and double power effects stack. So, I would say this would go in more decks than Temur Battle Rage would, as it is slightly more effective, minus the trample. So, good. Not going to have too wide adoption, but that's fine. Next is Spore Web Weaver. 2 and a green for a 1/4 with reach and hexproof from blue. Whenever Spore Web Weaver is dealt damage, you gain 1 life and create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. And it is a 1/4. First of all, do not like the hexproof from ability. It's just pointless. Just give it hexproof. Really, it's not that powerful. If you want to make it slightly weaker, do Shroud. I'm not sure if is Shroud even evergreen? I don't know. But don't love hexproof from blue, but that's okay. So, what is this similar to? Now, this one was a little bit more of a stretch than the others, but I just included it anyways. So, Hornet Nest is 2 and a green for a 0/2. When it's dealt damage, put that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch on the battlefield. Now, I'm not saying it's similar to this. I'm saying it's similar to this, but a Rampage version of it. If we look at decks, at Rampage decks, I would say it would go in a significant number of them. Not necessarily in the decks Hornet Nest goes into, but it makes tokens similar to Hornet Nest. So that's the one I put down. And Enrage is an ability, not a card. So I would say this will get picked up in Enrage decks, and just about nowhere else. Next is Garruk's Uprising. 2 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creatures you control have trample. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Now, I said this was similar to 2 cards. It's sort of a mesh of the two. Now, I would say it is similar but better than Cavalier, which is 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater comes into play, its controller draws a card. So that does work on opponents. And I'd say it's similar but worse to Colossal Majesty, which is 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. So, if we think about it, it is similar to that, except when it enters the battlefield, and whenever we cast a creature with power 4 or greater, whenever it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. Now, in some specific scenarios, for example, if we have a deck that can consistently create large tokens or large creatures, I would say in order for it to be better, we would have to consistently be able to produce a 4-power creature every turn. Now, sure, technically that would be 1 card more than the other card. I'm gonna say sometimes things go wrong. You're not getting it as consistently. As of the trample, that's a nice benefit, but I don't think it really adds much power to the card. So, overall, I'd say it's good, and it's going to go in some decks, but really, it's a worse Colossal Majesty. And Colossal Majesty had pretty limited pickup. Plus where it was printed, which I'm pretty sure it was printed in a Planeswalker deck. I think I categorized it wrong. No, I just decided it was more logical to categorize it this way. Plus the location is gonna make it so it has more limited adoption. So, it's kinda bad. Next up is Light of Promise. 2 and a white for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature has, whenever you gain life, put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. That is similar to Sunbond, which has the exact same text, except it's 3 and a white. And I think it's going to have the exact same adoption as Sunbond. Very limited, and only in one deck. Evra Halcyon Witness. Evra Halcyon Witness is 4 white for, I think it's a 4/4, and you can pay 4 to... Okay, that way you can switch it, you can gain a ton of life, put that many +1/+1 counters, and then you can switch it around whenever you want. You'll have a ton of life, you'll have a giant creature, all this stuff. So, next up is, it's kind of win more actually. I don't know why people play it, because if you're switching your life, you can probably kill someone, and then you're going to gain the life anyways, because it ever has lifelink. So, why are you putting +1/+1 counters on it? Honestly, it's pointless. If you have a Evra deck, just cut it. It's not even good. Even if you are winning, it's not win more. It's completely pointless. So, I don't know. Worst case scenario, you have a lower life total than someone, and then you can just kill them last after you've gained your life total twice. And if they're the most threatening player, well, like, I don't know. But in very rare scenarios, is it going to do anything at all? So I don't think it's easy to argue that it's playable. So, sorry. Next card, Teferi's Tutelage, is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. When Teferi's Tutelage enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent mills 2 cards. First of all, mill keyword, awesome. Second of all, similar to Psychic Corrosion. 2 and a blue, enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent puts the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard. Now, this is just a better version of Psychic Corrosion, and it will see just about the same adoption. It will be played in some cases, but it's not going to be that amazing. Alright, next is Teferi's Ageless Insight. 2 blue for a legendary enchantment. If you draw a card except for the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. This is similar to Alhammart's Archive. 5 for a legendary artifact. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. And if you would draw a card except for the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. So, yeah, if you are playing this in a deck that cares about the draw portion, you do not care about the life portion. So, this is just a 1 mana cheaper. Sure, it's blue, but 99% of the cards that care about that draw will be blue. This is just a 1 mana cheaper, hopefully, monetarily cheaper. Hallmark's Archive is either $20 or $10, depending on where you buy it. It's a pretty major difference, but whatever. So it's just a better version, and it's probably not going to be monetarily cheaper because of that. Alright, next up is Transmogrify. 3 and a red for a sorcery. Exile target creature. That creature's controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. That player puts that card onto their battlefield, then shuffles the rest into their library. That is similar to Chaos Warp, which is 2 and a red for an instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. Now, this is a significantly worse version of this, and I'd say is not going to have wide adoption. The only place this is going to have wide adoption is in decks with cards more similar to Transmogrify. Now, I'm thinking of a card, and I can't remember what it's called, and my internet is not working properly, so I can't really check. But in decks that have very similar effects that love revealing cards off of their library until they get a specific card or one of a couple of cards to take advantage of that, usually in blue, this will go in there most likely. But other than that, it's gonna see very limited play. Next similar card is Brash Taunter. 4 and a red for a 1/1. Whenever Brash Taunter is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. And it has 2 and a red. Brash Taunter fights another target creature. It is a 1/1. So this is very similar to Stuffy Doll. 5 for a 0/1. When it enters the battlefield, choose a player. It's indestructible. And when it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to the chosen player. And tap, it deals 1 damage to itself. So, literally, it's the same thing. It's indestructible, it deals the damage. The only differences are the cost, which Brash Taunter has red instead of colorless, which is a minor difference. Power has 1 power, and the tap ability. Brash Taunters cost 3 more mana, but can do significantly more damage. So, it's good. It will go in exactly the same places, nowhere more, nowhere less. Double Vision. 3, red for an enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell, well, actually, no. Not exactly the same places. If the deck doesn't have red, then it won't go there. But other than that, exactly the same places. Sorry. Double Vision. 3 red for an enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, this is exactly the same as Swarm Intelligence, other than the CMC. Swarm Intelligence is 6 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, minus the fact that one of them is red, and one of them is blue, they're the same. Yes, technically, if you cast 2 spells in the same turn, it will not trigger on both of them, but the odds of that being relevant are pretty low. The only places that would matter is in Storm decks. Or some other decks, but point is, not super relevant. So, Swarm Intelligence is played exactly nowhere. Sure, some people do play it, but it is a win more card that I would argue is almost always pointless. So, it is very rarely played and does see some play in some decks, but it is always at a low percentage because it's just not particularly useful. Double Vision, I think, will not be quite like that. I think it will find some homes, but not that many. It can be useful, but because of the fact that it is still played so late in the game, it's going to be hard to take good advantage of it. Because in order to get good value off of it, you're probably going to want to copy 3 spells, which is very hard to consistently do. So, I don't know. It's fine. It's not good. It's not bad. It will see some play, but it won't see that much. Next up is Terror of the Peaks. 3 red for a 5/4 with flying. Spells your opponents cast the target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. This is the same as Warstorm Surge, sort of. Warstorm Surge is 5 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So, the main abilities on Terror of the Peaks are the same. That last part is the same. The differences are, Terror of the Peaks is 1 less mana. 1 mana more red intensive, but still 1 less mana. It is a creature, which I'd say probably makes it worse. Depends on the deck, but vulnerability can be quite annoying. And spells opponents cast that target cost an additional 3 life. That's not going to stop anyone unless they have exactly 3 life left. Or 2 life. Or 1 life. You get the point. It's not going to stop anyone from targeting it because if they don't target it, they'll die anyways because you'll just cast a creature that kills them. So, that's not going to stop anyone, but it just gives you an additional 3 damage if it gets blown up. Sort of like a consolation prize. And it's a 5/4, which can be nice. So, overall, I would say it is significantly better. I'd say it's slightly better. Yeah, I'd say it's slightly better than Warstorm Surge. And it will see more play. But, I mean, no, I think it's going to see a lot more play. That 1 mana at this high of a mana cost makes a very, very large difference. So, I think it will see much more play. But it's hard to say. Alright, next is Twinblade Assassins. 3 red, 3 black, green for a 5/4. Creature Elf Assassin. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, draw a card. This is similar to Deathreap Ritual. 2 black, green for enchantment. Morbid. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. So, yeah, this is significantly worse. First of all, it only works on your end step. Second of all, it's a creature which can make it die more often. It also is a 5/4, so it can beat down. But I'd say, overall, it is significantly worse because of the fact that it only triggers on your end step. And Deathreap Ritual doesn't really see any play. So, it's also not going to see any play. Next up is Fiery Emancipation. 3 red for an enchantment. If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. So, first of all, this is probably a Mega Cycle. There's that 4 green thing that triples mana too. So this is probably going to be a Mega Cycle. White getting triple life, blue getting triple draw, black getting triple... We'll see. We'll see what black gets. But that's pretty good. We can compare it to Gratuitous Violence, which is 2 red, and it does the same thing except it's double. So, first of all, Gratuitous Violence will get replaced. Second of all, for some reason, Gratuitous Violence is extremely underplayed. It'd probably be better to compare it to something that doubles all damage dealt to everyone, but it only doubles damage we control. So, it's a little bit different depending. There's upsides and downsides of only doubling damage you control and only doubling damage doubling damage everyone controls. If you double the damage everyone controls, damage to you is also doubled. If you double, but also damage opponents deal is also doubled to your opponents. So, it's okay. This will see a large amount of play. I would say almost all damage doublers, even global ones, will get replaced with this. Because otherwise the damage doublers will not really be worth playing if you can't deal a significant amount of damage. And triple versus having everyone, even if that does work better in your deck, is a large enough difference to change your mind over. So this will see a large amount of play, but will be expensive. So that will limit some people. But other than that, that's kind of all there is on similar to new. Alright, so next thing I want to cover are cards in other languages. Now, this is just Archidekt Scryfall. No, it's an Archidekt error. It's not updated, and I don't really know how to change the language, so I'm just going to cover these real quick. So, first of all, Invigorating Surge, 2 and a green, for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on that creature. Great! You get lots of +1/+1 counters on that creature, which can probably kill someone. Likely your commander, likely Voltron. Bullfist Oak, 2 green for creature, 2/3. Whenever you draw a card, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Now, you're in green, so you can probably draw a lot of cards. But you may or may not be doing that. Now, there's a lot of different ways to draw cards. The main one that would work with this is drawing cards based off power. That would be wonderful, because you draw some cards, gets pumped up, you draw more cards over and over and over again. Because a lot of cards, for example, say you draw off power, and then you draw off combat damage, something like that. But, point is, you can draw a lot of cards, and this can be your win con. It's not the best win con, but it certainly works. Next is Waker of Waves, 5 blue. Creatures your opponent's control get -1, -0. 1 blue, discard Waker of Waves. It's a 7/7. Look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand, and the other into your graveyard. So, that's fine. I mean, it's sort of like cycling, but a little bit better. That's a great way to either have it be useful late game or useful early game. Next is Pursued Whale, which is 5 blue for an 8/8. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent creates a 1/1 red pirate creature token with this creature can't block, and creatures you control attack each combat if able. And spells your opponent's cast at target Pursued Whale cost 3 more to cast. Now, this is going to make it extremely difficult to kill Pursued Whale. Depending on the removal spell, usually they cost 1 to 3 mana. So, if it's 1 or 2 mana, I probably don't care. But if it's 6 mana to cast the removal spell, they might not remove it. And having creatures have to attack means they either attack you, and most likely get eaten by the Pursued Whale, at least the biggest creature, or they attack each other, which is just about the best thing. Having all your opponents attack each other is awesome. You don't have any downside. You're not getting very much hate. It's the best thing. It's wonderful. Alright, next up is Kinetic Augur, 3 and a red for an X4 with Trample, Human Shaman. Its power is equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, and when it enters the battlefield, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. It's fine. It can be a way to win in an instant and or sorcery deck, something like that. Can work, can also not work. It's mediocre. Demonic Embrace, 1 black for an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+1, has flying, and is a demon in addition to its other types. You may cast it from your graveyard by paying 3 life and discarding a card in addition to paying its other costs. This can be a very good way to benefit in a graveyard deck. Just being able to get an additional 3 damage can help a lot. Alright, next up is Angelic Ascension. Angelic Ascension is 1 and a white for an instant. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Its controller creates a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Now, there are a lot of different places this can be useful. 1, just as removal, this is pretty bad. Giving an opponent a 4/4 with flying kind of crosses the line. Pongify and Rapid Hybridization are blue where there's not very much removal. They destroy, sure, that's slightly worse. But they give a 3/3 without flying, and that is quite good. But giving a 4/4 with flying does kind of cross a line. Yes, it can be useful for removal, but can also be useful for creating a token that you can clone. That can be very useful. In decks that care about large tokens, this can be good for that specific purpose, and in a pinch, it can be good for getting rid of things. Leafkin Avenger is 2 red-green for a 4/3. Tap, add green for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So first of all, that's not really great. It is difficult to get very many creatures, never mind very many creatures with power 4 or greater. Plus it's 4 mana? It just seems kind of bad. It itself is power 4 or greater, and with 1 or 2 other creatures, it can be good, but I'd just say it's a little bit bad. I mean, there's always Growing Rites of Itlimoc, which works much, much better. Then it has a second ability of 7 in red. Leafkin Avenger deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker. Now, this might be good if it were Growing Rites of Itlimoc effect, but no, you're not going to be making enough mana for that to be a useful ability. You're just not. I highly, highly doubt you will ever be able to make even 4 mana with that. And dealing 4 damage to target player or planeswalker for 4 mana? Plus, you still are using the mana from Leafkin Avenger. It's not like that mana no longer exists just because you produced it with that. That ability is not good. And the first ability also isn't really that good. So, overall, I'd say it's pretty bad. Next is Malefic Scythe. I don't know. It is 1 and a black for an artifact equipment. Malefic Scythe enters the battlefield with a soul counter on it. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each soul counter on Malefic Scythe. Whenever equipped creature dies, put a soul counter on Malefic Scythe, and it has equip 1. So, this is an interesting card. This has to go in a deck in order to be effective. It has to go in a deck that loves sacrificing creatures and wins with Voltron. I don't know whether those two things go together at all, but maybe they do. I'm not sure. If they go together, then that would be great, and it could go in fairly well into that deck, or it could just go in with a Proliferate deck. But if not sure what this is going to be, other than, as I just said, a Proliferate deck. Next is Archfiend's Vessel. 1/1 life, black 1/1 lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, exile it. If you do, create a 5/5 black demon creature token with flying. This is just a good way to take advantage of a graveyard deck. There are a million different graveyard decks, but this is just a good way to take advantage of it. Being able to pay 1 mana to make a 5/5 demon can be quite useful. Next is Havoc Jester. which is 4 and a red for 5/5. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, Havoc Jester deals 1 damage to any target. I know this was a card. I know that there was a card very similar to this, but I don't remember what it was called. So, this will see some very limited play. Alright. Next, we are going to cover the Planeswalkers. So, first of all, we have Basri Cat. We have 1 white for a 3 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Basri. +1. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. It gains indestructible until end of turn. -2. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures attack this turn, create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. -6, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your combat on your turn, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. +1, putting a +1/+1 counter on and giving it indestructible can be useful. -2 is very good. And the -6, well, we're probably never going to get there, but -6 can be useful, yeah. Next is, well, Garruk is apparently in a different language. I'll have to check on that. Liliana, Waker of the Dead, is 2 black for a 4 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Liliana. +1, each player discards a card. Each opponent who can't loses 3 life. -3, target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. -7, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. -7, pretty good, hard to get to. +1, good. It is early game. Early game it's good because getting rid of cards can be good. It can be quite good. Late game it can be good because you might have gotten rid of their entire hands. -3, target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. That is also good. Next is Teferi, Master of Time. 2 blue for a 3 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Teferi. You may activate loyalty abilities of Teferi, Master of Time on any player's turn. Anytime you could cast an instant. 3 loyalty, +1, draw a card, then discard a card. -3, target creature you don't control faces out. And -10, take 2 extra turns after this one. Now, first look, you get to activate it on any player's turn. So you are getting to do this so much. +1, this is going to be a great default to just redo over and over and over again. Great. And have a wonderful hand by the end of it, probably. -3, that can be useful in a pinch, but it's not that great. And the -10, it's going to take you 2 rounds of the table to get there, I mean. You might do it, but you also might not, so it's hard to say. You will get targeted with it because of it. It'll be okay. We'll see. I've heard some people saying it'll dominate Standard, and I honestly have no idea about anything in Standard. I do not know anything. I literally have played, Arena for maybe, 3 or 4 hours. I've been playing it some, but I haven't really gotten into it. So, it's good. Being able to draw a card, then discard a card is quite powerful. Next is Chandra, Heart of Fire. 3 red for a 5 loyalty legendary Planeswalker, Chandra. It has +1, discard your hand, then exile the top 3 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may play cards exiled this way. Discarding your hand sucks, and only getting 3 cards isn't really that great, so that seems mediocre. honestly, it just kind of seems bad. I don't know. +1, Chandra deals 2 damage to any target. It's protection. Can't criticize protection too much. But it's kind of bad protection. And -9, search your graveyard and library for any number of red, instant, and or sorcery cards. Exile them, then shuffle your library. You may cast them this turn. Add 6 red. So that seems okay. I mean, you get 6 red to cast your creatures, plus what are your instants or sorceries, plus whatever you already have. That seems okay. I don't know. Honestly. Just 6 mana plus what you get, and then you can recast things from your spell, from your graveyard. You're not going to win the game. You'll get good value, but you're not going to win the game. Alright. So, real quick, just going to talk about Garruk. So, Garruk Unleashed is 2 green for a legendary planeswalker Garruk. +1. Up to 1 target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample. -2. Create a 3/3 green beast creature token. Then if an opponent controls more creatures than you, put a loyalty counter on Garruk. -7. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, you may search your library for a creature card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So, it's got 4 loyalty. +1, kinda bad. -2, also pretty bad. I mean, making a 3/3 is nice, but you're probably gonna end up not getting that loyalty. I mean, maybe. I mean, you're in green, so you've got... It just depends on the deck you're playing and what decks your opponents are playing. You've got decent odds either way. And the -7, you're gonna win in 2 turns, probably. Depending on how your deck is built, you might win in 1 turn. And you will easily win in 2 turns with any combo with no setup. And if you don't win in 2 turns with a combo, I'm sure you can figure out a way to win in 3 turns. If you don't win by then, I don't know what your deck is doing, but that is quite peculiar. Alright, next is... So, that is Planeswalkers. So, beyond that, there's the category of other... And then there's just lots of lots of other random categories. So, well, you know what? Let's talk about one that I think is awesome. So, this is shrines. So, shrines are basically legendary enchantments that trigger either on your... Well, they do something depending on how many shrines you have. Currently, there are 11 in the game because they just printed 6 more of them, which makes them extremely more viable. I'm working on brewing a deck. It's currently not finished, and I don't know when I will finish it. I will put a link to it in the description, and it may or may not be finished when you look at it. I guess you'll see. So, with those shrines, there are 6 of them. There is Sanctum of Tranquil Light, which is white for legendary enchantment shrine. 5 white, tap target creature. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each shrine you control. This would, I'd say, is probably one of the worst ones. Sanctum of Stone Fangs is 1 in a black for legendary enchantment shrine. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of shrines you control. It does say each opponent, so that is quite good. But considering there's only 11, it's hard to say how many you're really going to have. I mean, statistically, you'll probably only have 1 or 2 if we don't count tutors. But if you run 7, which is usually what people will be able to do, you'll probably be able to get 2 or 3. Either way, it's kind of mediocre. But, again, you are building around it in a way to specifically get more shrines. Plus, there's a lot more to it than that. Next is Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest, which is 2 and a green for a legendary enchantment shrine. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of shrines you control. So, you just get a lot of mana, which is awesome. Sanctum of Shattered Heights, 2 and a red for a legendary enchantment shrine. 1, discard a land or shrine card. Sanctum of Shattered Heights deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, where X is the number of shrines you control. This, I'd say, is also a pretty bad shrine, but just because it's a shrine means you have to run it in the deck. It just makes it so much better. Alright, next is Sanctum of Calm Waters. That is 3 and a blue for a legendary enchantment shrine. Beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may draw X cards, where X is the number of shrines you control. If you do, discard a card. Next is Sanctum of All. Sanctum of Calm Waters is great. You just get to draw a ton of cards, and then sure, you discard 1, but you drew a ton of cards. Next is, I'd say, the best shrine of them all. Sanctum of All. White, blue, black, red, green. For a legendary enchantment shrine. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library and or graveyard for a shrine card and put it on the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. That is awesome. Being able to get a shrine every single turn is going to add up so quickly. Next is, if an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you control 6 or more shrines, that ability triggers an additional time. There are 11 shrines, so if we get Sanctum of All, we have 1 from Sanctum of All. Every turn we're going to get 1. Statistically, because we assume we have Sanctum of All, that's not going to reduce the odds of us getting any other. So statistically, if we factor in tutors, we are likely to get 2 to 3 more shrines. So that would mean that we are likely to get maybe 3, maybe 4. So it's probably going to take us 2 to 3 turns. Plus, if we factor in the fact that we're playing Sisay, Weatherlight Captain, as the commander, which basically lets you search for legendary permanents out of your library, which shrines are always legendary, which makes it so much easier to get them, then we are very consistently going to be able to get 6 or more shrines without too much weight. Yes, that would be, I think, the best the best commander for the deck. Alright, now it's into the niche categories. So, Cat Dog, as you saw the Cat Dog commander, they are printing some cards that work with cats and dogs. So, Animal Sanctuary, land, tap, add colorless, 2, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on target bird, cat, dog, goat, ox, or snake. Yes, it targets lots of things, but cat and dog are on there, so that's how I categorized it. Alpine Houndmaster. 2X and a red and a white for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a card named Alpine Watchdog and or a card named Igneous Cur. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. Those are 2 pretty bad dogs. You may want to run them. You may not. That's up to you. But whatever. And whenever Alpine Houndmaster attacks, it gets +X/+0 until end turn, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. It's okay. It's fine. It's not the best. It gets 2 bad creatures, and it can deal a lot of damage. But that second ability can be useful in a significant number of decks. Pack Leader is 1 and a white for a 2/2. Other dogs get +1/+1. And whenever Pack Leader attacks, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn to dogs you control. That is very good. Feline Sovereign, 2 and a green for a 2/3. Other cats you control get +1/+1 and have protection from dogs. Whenever 1 or more cats you control deal combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls. Though that is also an incredibly good ability. The protection from dogs thing is kind of weird, honestly, but whatever. Alright, so Next category we'll say is combo piece. Conspicuous Snoop is, for both of these combo pieces, they're actually also useful in other places, but I just put them here because they are combo pieces. And I'm pretty sure there was at least one other combo piece here that I didn't include in this category because I felt it fit more closely into another deck, or into another category. Conspicuous Snoop is red for a 2/2. Play with the top card of your library. Revealed. You may cast goblin spells from the top of your library, and as long as the top card of your library is a goblin card, Conspicuous Snoop has all activated abilities of that card. This combos with Kiki-Jiki. If the top card of your library is Kiki-Jiki, you can tap Conspicuous Snoop to make a copy of itself, and then you have another thing that can make a copy of itself. Over and over again. And you get infinite tapped Conspicuous Snoops that go away at the end of turn, which kind of sucks, but you can still take advantage of it. Plus, you can cast goblin spells from the top of your library, so maybe you'll get rid of that and have something useful. So, we'll see, but that can make you infinite tapped Conspicuous Snoops, which may or may not be useful. Next is 9 lives, which is 1 white for an enchantment with hexproof. If a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage and put an incarnation counter on 9 lives. When there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, exile it. When 9 lives leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. So, there are a lot of different ways that make it so that counters cannot be put on it, so you just can't lose. The main one being, of course, if I can remember the card, it's 2 and a white, and counters can't be put on cards. I don't know. I can't remember the card, but it's just a way to not die. Next is Spark Hunter Masticore, 3 for a 3/4 artifact creature Masticore. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. Protection from Planeswalkers. 1. Spark Hunter Masticore deals 1 damage to target Planeswalker. 3. Spark Hunter Masticore gains indestructible until the end of turn. I don't know if I have to tell you guys this, but this is bad. We analyzed a while ago, we analyzed the Elder spell and found that it was bad. Well, unless you're playing against a Super Friends deck. This is just not good. Do not run this card, even if you are playing against a Planeswalker deck. There are so many better ways to deal with it. Mainly the Elder spell, but also, cards such as just a removal spell that will get either a Planeswalker or a creature. There's a Zombie Tribal card got printed, 2 and a black for 2/3. Zombies get +1/+0 at the beginning of your end step. If a creature died this turn, you may pay 1 and a black if you do create a 2/2 zombie. There are some life gain payoffs. Speaker of the Heavens, which is white for a 1/1 Vigilance lifelink. Tap, create a 4/4 white angel. With flying, activate this ability only if you have at least 7 life more than your starting life total, and only time you could cast a sorcery. Only any time you could cast a sorcery. Indulging Patrician is a 1/4, 1 white black for a 1/4 with flying lifelink. And at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, each opponent loses 3 life. That's cool. Life gain payoffs can help make life gain much more viable. Next is flying support. These are just cards that help flying tribal be much more effective. 3 and a blue for 2/3. Flying. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures with flying, draw a card. That is Tide Skimmer. Great. Watcher of the Spheres. 1 and a blue for 2/2. Flying. Creature spells with flying you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever another creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Mill is Thieves Guild Enforcer. Black for a 1/1 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, under your control, each opponent mills 2 cards. As long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, Thieves Guild Enforcer gets +2/+1 and has Death Touch. That is good. Just being able to flicker it can be quite good. Stuff like that. It's a small effect, but it can be good. Next is Death Touch help. So, I couldn't really fit, like, Death Touch support or something. Hooded Blightfang is 2 and a black for 1/4 with Death Touch. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals damage to a Planeswalker, destroy that Planeswalker. Now, this is good because it helps the Death Touch tribal decks. Now, while they are fairly limited, that is for a reason. There's not very much support for Death Touch tribal decks, and this is just a great way to help that exist. Next is Spirit Tribal. Shacklegeist, 1 and a blue for a 2/2 with flying. Shacklegeist can block only creatures with flying. Tap 2 untapped spirits you control. Tap target creature you control. Tap target creature you don't control. So, that's pretty bad. There's not really too much else other than this last category, which I just put under other. So, for that, we have 14 cards. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't specifically categorize everything, because some of these categories literally only have 1 card in them, but whatever. See the Truth, 1 and a blue for a sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 of those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. If this spell was cast from anywhere other than your hand, put each of those cards into your hand instead. This is good in basically an instant or sorcery spell deck that has recursion. Recursion specifically that casts from your graveyard, not from your hand. That way, it's a deck that can very well play that card without the second clause, and it can also take advantage of the if it was cast somewhere else clause on that card. So that can be quite effective. Next is Conclave Mentor, green, white for a 2/2. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. When Conclave Mentor dies, you gain life equal to its power. That is quite a tongue twister. So it's fine. It helps +1/+1 counter decks. It has to be in Selesnya, which isn't the best colors for +1/+1 counter decks, but it works. 1 and a blue for 2/1 Ghostly Pilferer. When it becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card, and discard a card. Ghostly Pilferer can't be blocked this turn. Honestly, it's not that good. I mean, untapping it to draw cards can be useful in a deck that likes to do that. Opponents casting spells is kind of out of your control, and will probably not have too much of an effect. I may or may not be able to analyze that. I'm gonna check on that. I don't know, because, I mean, in order to analyze it, what I could do is I could calculate the number, I could check how much cards that let people cast things from places other than their hand are played. But that's difficult with things that are used multiple times. There's a lot of things that complicate that. But I'll look into it. Not sure if we'll be able to do it or not. Next is Idol of Endurance. 2 and a white for an artifact. When Idol of Endurance enters the battlefield, exile all creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard until Idol of Endurance leaves the battlefield. So, first of all, and then it says, 1 tab, until end of turn, you may cast a creature spell from among the cards exiled with Idol of Endurance without paying its mana cost. So, first of all, this is just a way to recast the spells. Now, 3 mana to get it all back isn't bad. Having to pay 1 and a white also is not as bad as you would think, because of the fact that it only works on small creatures. Now, this is quite difficult, honestly, to find a deck for. All the decks that do specifically only want those creatures recurred already have their method of recurring them. For example, Alesha. But with something like Alesha, you want to be able to do it with both of those things. And having to get rid of all of your creatures in order to be able to do it with that is kind of annoying. Plus, you don't have to pay its mana cost, which is nice, but I don't know. It's okay. It's not the best, it's not the worst. It'll do the trick and be useful in some cases, but sometimes it just won't. Next is Liliana's Standard Bearer. 2 and a black for 3/1 with flash. When Liliana's Standard Bearer enters the battlefield, draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures that died under your control this turn. So, this is, I would say, quite good. In decks that love to kill their creatures, this can work very, very well. This also does not say non-token, which can make it much, much better. So, if there's a Wrath, or if you just want to sack your entire board, this can draw you a significant number of cards. I'd say it really only has to draw you 2 in order to give you good value, because it is a 3/1. Plus, it does have flash. It being 3 mana and having to cast it on the same spell as everything dying might be difficult depending on how you're killing everything, but other than that, it's fairly good. Next is Basri's Lieutenant. 3 and a white for a 3/4. Vigilance, protection from multicolored. When Basri's Lieutenant enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And whenever Basri's Lieutenant or another creature you control dies, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with Vigilance. So, it can help in knight decks, it can help in +1/+1 counter decks, and it can, well, that's kind of all. But that's fairly good array of decks that it could fit into. Next is Experimental Overload, which is 2 blue-red for sorcery. Create an XX blue, red, and XX blue and red weird creature token. Then, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, then you may return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to a hand. Exile Experimental Overload. First of all, I don't know why a descriptive word is being used as a creature type. I know weirds have been a creature type for so long, I just think it's a weird choice. Beyond that, getting an instant or sorcery back is good. I'd say probably 2 mana value, maybe a little less, because usually cards that you can get back instants and sorcery for 2 mana have some benefit. But for that extra 2 mana, you get a giant dude if you brought back a big thing. I'd say it could be good. I mean, it's sort of a thing you'd play early game, sort of thing you would play this late game. So, I mean, getting it back is nice, but I just don't know how many decks have giant instants and sorcery spells that they need to recur. I guess spells that can cheat things out would love this. I'm just gonna go to the next one. I could definitely see this being played, but not necessarily in too many places. Stormwing Entity is 3 blue for 3/3. This spell costs 2 blue less to cast if you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. So that would be 1 and a blue. It has flying, prowess, and when it enters the battlefield, scry 2. So, first of all, the odds of that instant or sorcery spell costing 2 and a blue is fair. I mean, you're not necessarily going to be able to cast them in the same spell, but most of the time you will, and it will only cost 1 and a blue. If it doesn't, it's pretty bad. If it does cost 1 and a blue, you got 1 and a blue for 3/3 with flying, prowess, and scry 2. So, Scry 2, nice, probably not relevant. Flying, nice, but Prowess is where it really is helpful. This is a great way to get some damage in, and it's not really gonna do too much in the deck, but it's just a good way to get some extra value and extra damage in. Next is Elder Gargaroth. Is 3 green for 6/6 with Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. Whenever Elder Gargaroth attacks or blocks, choose one. Create a 3/3 green beast creature token. You gain 3 life or draw a card. So these are fairly standard. Gaining 3 life is pretty bad. Drawing a card, and making a 3/3 are fairly useful. I mean, there's not too much about it. It's a good beater. It can pack a punch, and it's just good. It's just good at what it does. Sorry, my voice is like really dying, and I can't speak because I have been having shorter episodes, and now I am having a longer episode. Yeah, it's been probably 2 hours now, so I guess that's just how set reviews go. Chandra's Incinerator is 5 and a red for 6/6. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total amount of non-combat damage dealt to your opponents this turn. And it has Trample. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, Chandra's Incinerator deals that much damage to target creature or planeswalker that player controls. So, that's fine. I mean, it's okay. That being able to double damage of non-creature it's good. It is very good, but how much of the damage actually is non-creature? I mean, you're getting a 6/6 beater, which is nice, and it's going to be cheaper, but when you're cheapening it, you have to spend mana in order to do that. It's because it has to be non-combat damage. So, you probably will be able to cast this for like 4 or 5 mana, and then you'll be able to maybe get some benefit off that non-creature, non-combat source, but it's difficult because you just used it all when you were preparing to get that creature out. So, it's fine. Don't think it's going to work as well as you would expect it to, but it certainly can do very well if you are careful with it. And intentional with it. You know exactly how it's going to function, and you have thought it out. What you're likely to draw, how it's likely to go, and you've tested it. Next is Discontinuity. 3 blue for an instant. As long as it's your turn, this spell costs 2 blue less to cast. End the turn. Exile all spells and abilities from the stack, including this card. The player whose turn it is discards down to their maximum hand size. Damage wears off, and this turn and until end of turn effects end. So, this is, well, let's just split into 2 things. If we are talking about doing it on your own turn, it is 1 and a blue mana to end the turn. Well, there are much better ways to do that, specifically the 2 mana artifact that lets you use 1 mana and tap it to do it. Can't remember what it's called. There are much better ways to do it, but it certainly does the trick. And for it to work, basically the only things that I could see really it working with are those red take an extra turn cards that have you lose the game at the end of that extra turn. You will not get that trigger, so that's good, I guess, but that's okay. It's fine. It's not that good, it's not that bad. If you use it on your own turn, in very specific decks, it can be useful. If you use it on an opponent's turn, it could very easily give you that last turn you need to win, but considering the fact it's 6 mana, it seems to me like you are skipping your opponent's turn and countering one of their spells in exchange for your turn. I mean, the downside of it is either you let them have their combat, and you probably don't get to cast a spell, or you probably don't get to counter a spell, or you don't let them have their combat. Either you let them have their combat, and you get to counter a spell, or you don't let them have their combat, and you don't get to counter a spell. So either way, it's not great. I'd say yes, in some scenarios it could be useful, but if you can't reasonably use it on your own turn, I don't see it being worth it. Next is Tolarian Kraken. 4 blue for 4/6. Whenever you draw a card, you may pay 1. When you do, you may tap or untap target creature. I see this as a way to get mana back. If you can untap something that gives you 2 mana, you can just get a mana every time you draw a card, which can be quite useful. Plus, in a lot of decks, such as the Skull Clamp and Locust God combo, you could pay 1 mana to draw some cards. Next up is Chromatic Orrery, 7 for a legendary artifact. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color, and tap, add white, colorless. 5, tap, draw a card for each color among permanents you control. So, I am kind of down on this. For 7 mana, you don't necessarily need to be ramping anymore. I'd say it's significantly better to just run things that let you cheat in cards. I mean, having perfect fixing is nice, but it doesn't really matter once you have 7 mana. And having an additional 5 mana, I mean, you'll probably have 13 mana the next turn. And I mean, sure, you're getting 5 mana back this turn, but it just seems like a super uncommon deck that can actually take advantage of it. And that second ability, the first time you activate it, you're basically spending 12 mana to draw a card for each color among permanents you control. I mean, you're probably going to be drawing 3 or 4 cards in a 5-color deck, depending, of course, on the deck. And I mean, sure, with your commander, you can usually get most of your colors, but it just doesn't seem great. I feel like I'm going to be proved wrong on that, but it just doesn't seem that good. Alright, next is Peer into the Abyss. Peer into the Abyss is 4 black for sorcery. Target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and loses half their life. Round up each time. So, that is quite good. I mean, you can do it on an opponent if you can kill them. Probably not what you're going to do. You can draw half of your library, which is probably what you are going to do. When you are drawing half of your library, you'll probably have some way to win. Be it an advantage from you discarding cards, be it an advantage from you drawing cards, which is most likely, or, well, actually the losing of the life is not why you're going to win. But, point is, you can draw quite a lot of cards off of this, and you will almost definitely be able to win with the cards you get, if not by the very fact of you drawing the cards. Alright, time to get into the last category, removal. There are 3 cards in removal, and now that I think about it, there probably should have also been discontinuity in removal, but that's fine. We have Miscast, which is blue for an instant. Counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 3. This is great protection against counter spells, against removal, against things like that. Or it can just be used as removal for your opponent's instant or sorcery spells. There is Sublime Epiphany, which is 4 blue for an instant. Choose 1 or more. Counter target spell. Counter target activated or triggered ability. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and target player draws a card. So, let me go through these. There are 2 of these that you're not just going to do almost all the time. Counter target spell and counter target activated or triggered ability. You are almost definitely going to be countering target spell. That is when you're going to cast this. You're going to wait until you can do that. You might end up doing an activated or triggered ability instead if you're desperate, but probably not. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand can be quite valuable. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control can be quite valuable. Target player draws a card also can be, well, actually no, it's just generally good, but not that good. And last up is Volcanic Salvo. 10 red for sorcery. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total power among creatures you control. Volcanic Salvo deals 6 damage to each creature, to each of up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. So, again, it's removal. I think I'll probably do, not this week, but maybe next week, I'll do a teaching how to analyze of how to analyze what power you're likely to have. But, of course, I've been actually avoiding doing those until I run out of cards to analyze, other cards to analyze, because I just think it is much better to give you the answers, because I know you guys are not necessarily going to do it. You're not necessarily going to put in the effort to do this in your decks, and I think it's much easier if I just give you the answer. I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong opinion. I think it kind of is. But anyways, I will be putting links in the description to a deck which I put together, which is Core 2021 Notables. I will link to a couple other relevant things. This is not all of the cards in Core Set 2021. I got rid of some that I just thought were not notable, and I did not talk about many reprints. I only talked about the super notable ones, so I will be putting links in the description to the rest of the cards in M21, and I will be putting a link in the description to a Core 2021 Notables deck. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to dislike, unsubscribe, hit that little don't recommend channel button, leave my Discord server, link in the description, and force friends to sign a contract to never watch my content. There will be links in the description to a hypergeometric distribution calculator if that is relevant to today's discussions, which it very commonly is. I'm probably just going to make that a standard, always in the description. There will be links to my personal Architect account, my Commander Quest Architect account. My Commander Quest Architect account is the account which I post Commander Quest related decks, and my personal Architect account is just where I put whichever decks that I'm working on that I might want to build or that are not part of the Commander Quest. There will be time blocks in the description, or if you're watching on YouTube, it will be in chapters. And you can email me at griffindon't@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.